Now, gentlemen, I'm sure we've all watched a heavy diet of political speeches in our time. I think this virtual format suited Biden. He could make the speech. It was intimate, it was personal. He didn't get all those sort of interruptions and the noise of those big rallies. Perversely, that sort of setting really suits President Trump. So I'll see what happens next week when we go to the Republicans. What did you make of it all today, Mark?
Well, I found the whole format to be sterile, asinine. It's the world's most boring video show, predictable, ridiculous at many levels. You know, the old conventions had at least some of the spontaneity of real human interaction. So I know it's driven by the COVID social distancing, but it kind of suits the Democrats. They're into identity politics, denying individuality, grouping everyone together. So, you know, when they don't have real human interaction and it's just a TV show, well, it's probably what they've got to. And the other thing I found curious, the whole series of TV actresses who hosted the conventions. The lady on the first night, the last time I'd seen her on TV, she was bonking the teenage gardener. So why they get people out there, it's their job to be fake and to just act it. Again, that seems to suit the modern Democrat Party.
Rowan?
Yeah, I thought it was, and that's brilliant, Mark. I thought it was very telling how Joe Biden was basically rehashing Obama's speeches from years ago. It was all hope and change. And the most worrying part of all was this, he sees himself as the light and Donald Trump as the darkness. I would have thought the term dark or darkness had some certain racist overtones that he might find himself having to apologise further down the track for having used such disgusting terms. But the absolutely zero detail from Joe Biden, lots of touchy-feely, lovey stuff that many loveys unfortunately will fall for. But this pitching himself as some kind of almost in religious terms. Remember when Obama promised the oceans would start receding and the planet would heal itself if he got nominated. So when he got nominated. So I suppose Biden's pretty much doing the same thing. He's the light. He's the evangelical light, I guess, the spiritual light versus the darkness of Donald Trump. I think most people will see through that.
Yeah, but I do have to say, you know, for a guy that's got questions over his mental fitness, that seems to fall apart when he comes under pressure. This is such an unusual US campaign. There's none of the debates, there's none of the pressured interviews, there's none of the big rallies, which are really hard when you're at the podium to manage in terms of that noise and all the interruptions. This is the campaign, if ever you had one, that would suit someone like Biden with all of those sort of issues to contend with. Let's go closer to home. More sort of factional, well, it's not just a brouhaha. I have to say, Mark, it's getting close to a bit of a war. I thought it might have quietened down after yesterday, you know, the backwards and forwards in between the leader and Joel Fitzgibbon. But, you know, your good friend Mark Butler, he waded in and had quite a bit to say, pushed back against Fitzgibbon, made it very clear that there's, you know, deeply serious issues, greenhouse gases, climate change, the whole bit. What's happening here?
Well, it's the Labor Party talking about a split for the first time since 1955. So culturally, internally, that's quite an earthquake. But the most laughable aspect of all of this was Anthony Albanese saying we're a modern party with modern policies. The responsibility of the leader when the party is split on policy is find a policy everyone can live with where they get something out of it. And Labor's policy on nuclear and uranium mining is cast from the 1970s. It's a relic. It belongs as a museum piece. And it's the logical way to go. If you're on the left of politics, you're worried about emissions. Well, nuclear power is carbon emission free. If you're on the other side of the Labor Party, Joel Fitzgibbon, who says, only because he thought he'd lose his own job at the last election, he says he's now worried about mining jobs and manufacturing jobs. Nuclear power is reliable baseload power. It would bring down electricity prices. It's the logical solution to Labor's energy wars. So why doesn't Albanese embrace that? Why? Oh, Tom Uren told him 40 years ago you couldn't do nuclear and uranium power. It's a shibboleth of the Labor Party, a sacred cow. So when you're listening to some old guy from 40 years ago, it shows that Albanese too belongs as a museum piece. He's not modern. He's been on the wrong side of every issue for 40 years, and here he is doing it again.
Well, down in Victoria too, I mean, we've talked about it here on Sky News for some time, every sense that Daniel Andrews would have to walk away. He can't survive COVID, and he certainly can't survive having been the leader for 10 years of Labor in Victoria, and obviously the branch stacking and the party now in administration. What do you think is going to happen, Rowan?
Well, obviously they're now working out how to get rid of him, because we're reading about it in the newspaper. So someone's busily undermining Dan Andrews. I'm not sure Dan Andrews intends to toddle off that soon, but they're saying next year he'll go as soon as the coronavirus is clear. They'll put someone else in. But what a motley crew they're offering up, including the bloke who's responsible for the quarantine fiasco. Now, there might be a slight problem with some of these characters standing as a leader, because they might be in jail by then. Under Victoria's own workplace manslaughter laws. They certainly deserve to be, by my reading of their own legislation. But can I just very quickly, Peter, just say that the split within the Labor Party was heralded years and years ago by none other than Mark Latham. And if people are looking for a Labor Party that stands for jobs, a Labor Party, a workers' party that represents workers, understands the basic blue-collar history of the Labor Party, they should be looking at One Nation and at Mark Latham, because that is where that part of the party already has split, and the voters have gone along with them.
All welcome. All welcome to join and support us.
I'm sorry to say, gentlemen, we've run out of time, but before I go, kudos, Mark, I must pay kudos to you. A big move on the uranium mining in New South Wales, and some big changes in education and teacher standards, all because you have pushed a barrow and you've held governments to account. So well done to you.
Well, that's right. The uranium mining is jobs and investment. So naturally, the New South Wales Labor Party is opposed to it.
Exactly.
Too much common sense, mate. Enjoy your weekend, gentlemen. Rowan Dean, Mark Latham.